Hi, everyone. Welcome to Domain Sherpa. Today is an episode of Down the Rabbit Hole talking about daily fantasy sports with Andrew Miller, David Lazowski, Willie Walls, and Roman Edmond. While these guys claim to not be professionals, they're definitely experts and have some big wins and bad beats to prove it. To that end, we'll talk about some of their past successes, which games they currently play, some of the strategies they use, and who they like in the NFL this upcoming weekend. It's a great show and a lot of fun, so don't miss it. So tune in right now to Down the Rabbit Hole here on Domain Sherpa, where while all roads lead to domains, today's roads lead to DFS. It's game time.
It don't matter what you say, there ain't no way that you messing with my team today. It don't matter what you do, I will not lose.
What's up, Sherpa Network? Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Jonathan Tenenbaum, aka JT, aka Jay On, and I'm the host and producer of Domain Sherpa, where all roads lead to domains. Today's show is a down the rabbit hole. So like we say here on Domain Sherpa, all roads lead to domains. In the reverse, our work in domains has us venturing all the time into different areas and topics, some that are more familiar to us like crypto, NFTs, digital assets, and plenty of others that aren't so familiar, hence the jump down the rabbit hole. Today's show, I'm here live in Orlando where I happen to be doing some traveling, but we've got an incredible show coming up. In fact, the last time I was in Orlando, I had my boy Andrew Miller here on the show, and we've got him back today, but this time with his crew of wily daily fantasy sports denizens who are going to be talking about DFS and a lot of that fun stuff. We actually just did a panel at NamesCon online recently with Andrew, Roman, and myself. We're going to introduce more where we talked about DFS. It was really well received. I personally really enjoyed it. I don't play a lot of DFS, although I do fantasy sports in general, do some gambling. And so I personally love this stuff. And I'm super excited for today's show. So with that, over to my right, we got my boy, Andrew Miller, a.k.a. Sam Ace Rothstein, a.k.a. Bill Belichick. And as those of you who know, he's been on the show plenty. I don't know if I need to give you a big old intro, but Miller is a seasoned domainer, investor, advisor, and a DFS expert. So today's going to be a lot of fun. Super excited for the show. So why don't we do this? Miller, since this is your world and kind of your thing, why don't you introduce the rest of these guys? Let's go ahead.
All right. I'm excited because, Roman and I had this crazy idea to do this at NamesCon, and I kind of convinced Søren to do it. And he's like, all right, let's try it. And it really turned out to get, we got a lot of post-show comments about how popular it was. So JT was like, let's do it again for Rabbit Hole. And here we are. And
let's go.
I changed out of my Bored Ape sweatshirt and put on my Daily Fantasy Championship shirt for this one. So we got a great group. I think we're just going clockwise, and I'm going to introduce everyone and have, tell a quick little daily fantasy story. And we'll just go around the clock the wrong way, since I have that on my sheet. We'll start with Laz, who is one of my oldest friends way back from our 20s, many moons ago. We both ended up in this daily fantasy world. For those domainers on here, Laz was one of the brilliant minds behind the acquisition of Home.com, but we're not going to talk about domains today. But his company, Fairway, where he is killing it, was the smart enough company to acquire Home.com, which resonates with a lot of domainers. But we're talking DFS. So
that was a fantastic move, and we should not to undersell that. I mean, Home.com was an incredible purchase. What a power move, and incredible. So, I do for the domain maxis, we got to let them know,
Well, I got Miller to thank for that. And I'll tell you, I don't think we would have gotten there without Andy's expertise and ability to source this in the right way. Yep. And I think it's a game changer for our company. This is part of our next generation. The opportunity to develop that into an ecosystem around home and everything related to home is what we're attempting to do. It'll take some time, but we are incredibly excited about this acquisition. As you know, it's never traded before. Someone's held it since the 90s. So for us to be able to acquire this as an asset in our digital approach is going to be an absolute home run. So shout out to Andy for getting that done for us.
Love it.
And speaking of home runs, I got this shirt that I got in 2016, which I'll discuss a little more when I get to Willie, at the 2016 DraftKings NBA Live Final. But then there's Laz. And Laz, I don't know if you could just quickly do a quick spin around and show the audience this, but Laz's swag from DraftKings is something else. He's the big boy here. He's got the true game personalized jersey. So Laz, Laz's DraftKings or daily fantasy name is Laz Gets Fit, and he's become pretty legendary. Laz, every Sunday from 10 to 11:30, I listen to Alex Baker, who's the #1 Awesemo daily fantasy player in the world. I listen to his Live Unlock podcast every Sunday. It's religion to me. It's part of my homework. That's the last thing I do for my homework is take a 5-mile walk and put on live lock, Alex Baker. And a couple of weeks ago, I'm hearing Alex and they're talking about this legend of Laz. And I'm like, oh man, here we are. I called him up and I let him know. So, Laz has won hundreds of thousands of dollars this year alone in NFL daily fantasy, but he's come in, I think, second in 2 milli makers, or is it only one? Just remind me about that.
In a milli maker, I've had a number of top 100 finishes. Came in second in a milli maker in 2015.
Right. I want you to tell that story briefly.
Oh man, that's right. JT,
the short version, the end version.
I just want to tell JT, I have never done a podcast on DFS. This is the very first one.
Oh yeah.
And I'm telling you, I have had, I'm not kidding, about 25 inquiries for me to go on because some of the stuff I do is unconventional. Sure. And basically half the world thinks I'm an idiot in my approach towards DFS. They've been trying to get on podcasts really for the last 4 or 5 years. I've chosen to totally stay under the radar because it's more fun being a legend than being real. But at the end of the day, this is the first podcast. So I'm excited to be here with you. Love the things that you've been doing, JT. And you couldn't ask for a better buddy than Andy Miller.
Oh, 100%, man.
Happy to be here. I just wanted to say that to start. But real quick, 2015, and this was when DK was just getting started. There was question around legality. It was a crazy year, 2015, if you remember. There was all kinds of stuff going on that year around the legality of the whole world of doing daily fantasy. And was it gambling? Was it not? Clearly, we all know it's gambling. Let's not kid ourselves. But there was some uncertainty around that. But here we are, week 15 of that season. It's a large milli maker. I have a total of 96 entries. It's Sunday night, and this is when you would head into the Monday night game, and you still had people. Now they're all done on Sunday. But back then, you would still have the Monday night game to still be alive in. So here we are going into the end of Sunday night. One of my buddy texts me. I didn't even realize it. He goes, dude, you're number 8. And I'm like, wow. So I gather up a bunch of my friends. We end up going to this sports bar Monday night. Here we are. I called my accountant because I realized that there's no one ahead of me with any players left. And I just have one player left. And I'm, not quite, listen, I'm not a professional. I love this. This is a blast. I do this because it's totally fun. But I'm thinking, wow, I'm in a really good position. And I've got Keith Hightower going as my running back for the New Orleans Saints.
Tim Hightower.
Tim Hightower. That'll tell you I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Hightower is my running back for the New Orleans Saints. They're playing Detroit. Two teams are both 4-9, whatever. They're not having a good season. We go into the Monday night game. There's no one else ahead of me, so I'm just hoping for some points. We get into the second quarter, and picture this, we're at a sports bar with 25 of the guys I work with. It's a real festive environment. Second quarter, Tim Hightower gets a touchdown. I'm in first place. Second quarter, called back for illegal formation.
Oh, no.
Totally deflating. You can imagine that situation. Totally deflating. It takes me about a full quarter to recover, but I'm good. I go back between 8th place and 6th place. Other people I realize can catch me from behind, but it's totally fun. At the end of the day, there's about a minute left in the game, JT, and I'm in 6th place. And it pays $75,000. Detroit has the ball. I'm good. I'm like, wow, this has been amazing. I buy drinks for the whole bar that's there, and I call it a day. And I head out to my car, and there's still a minute left. I leave just because, they have the ball. They're going to kick a field goal. I don't think they've ever missed a field goal for the whole season. I go to my car and I see 3 or 4 guys are coming at my car 20 minutes later. I think they need a ride home. They're like, Les, did you see what happened? I'm like, no, what happened? At the end of the day, they missed the field goal. New Orleans gets the ball back. they throw a meaningless pass with 12 seconds left to Tim Hightower for about 8 yards, 9 yards. But it brings me, and the game ends, it's over. Like no one else would care watching that. But it brought me from 6th place to 2nd place.
Wow.
And in that particular week, it paid $400,000.
Oh, congratulations, man. That is awesome. What,
Yeah, that was fun.
And to get to spend it with some of your buddies like that, you know, I mean, I think that's just, and that's some gambling in sports in general, right? I mean, and what I like about gambling and fantasy and you know, and I do a lot of fantasy leagues, but not the daily stuff. Although now I'm going to have to start playing daily fantasy because, you know, I can't be in a room like this and not start messing with it. You know what I mean? But
and then before we jump to Laz, I just want to tell you though, there was I don't remember the exact scenario, Laz, but like a year, I think it was 2 seasons ago, I remember watching, it was the Sunday night game, or maybe the end of the last game going, because the games all now end. There's no Sunday night and Monday night are not in the Millie Maker anymore. So it was the last game, overtime maybe, or was just running really late. And I was watching, and Laz was like in first, and I was on my floor, like, oh my God, he's about to take down the Millie. And I don't remember exactly what happened. I remember it was Pittsburgh, but something happened at like the very end, and it turned into a really bad beat, which we'll talk about. I don't remember the exact details.
I can tell you, I can remember. It was a bad beat.
Oh, why? That's painful, man. That's painful to be even.
That's the fun of it. That's the life we live, right? That's the choice.
And I think that's what, you know, I mean, and we say it all the time. I mean, you know, betting on games, it's like, because you turn a meaningless Detroit, you know, New Orleans game, like you said, you're not a fan of either team. You know, they're not in a position where it matters there's no playoff implications.
I'm definitely not a fan of either team. I'll just tell you.
Yeah. Oh man, a lot of Patriots, man. A lot of Pats.
Yeah, a lot of Patriots going here.
Pats love in here. I mean, I'm an Eagles fan. We're struggling, but
oh man, I was at the Eagles Pats game 2 years ago. And I think somehow you beat us. It was crazy.
Yeah, it was a pick six and some other things. And
so I'm going to jump down. Let's keep moving the intros.
Yeah.
If that's okay, JT.
Yeah,
I got to kind of do your job here.
No, I'm happy to have you do it. I feel like, you know, it's like a lot of the work off my shoulders. I love this.
Below us, we have on photo and sound Willie Walls. So Willie Walls holds a dear place in my heart because in 2016 I flew out to San Diego as a qualifier for one of 100 people competing for $2 million for the DraftKings NBA Live Final in San Diego. A great event, you know, 3 days. They wine and dine you and do it up. But I make my lineup, and I'm kind of early in NBA in this. And I'm actually with my son, who was 13, I guess, at the time. And we're having a great time. And, you know, back then there was no late swapping, meaning once you set your lineup at a live final, that was it. You had to set it, and then you went to this big room to watch it with all the other 100 contestants in this kind of crazy party atmosphere. And I settle into a chair with my son and, you know, meet some nice people. And sitting behind me is Willie and his friend. And nice guy, got to know him, hanging out, loved him. You know, we were talking, competing with one another, but friendly. And then my son and I were in 99th place at halftime of the first game out of 100. And like, we had the most sad, dejected, horrible look on our face. And I'm like, almost at a point where I'm like, should we just go back to the room? And this is embarrassing. And suddenly, second half, or other games start kicking off. 8 games on the TVs, and bang, we start moving. 80th, 70th, 50th, 40th, 30th. And I look, the whole time behind me, there's this guy yelling, Mr. Frazier. Mr. Frazier. So Tim Frazier was a G League pickup by the New Orleans Pelicans that season, about 2 weeks before this event. And I happened to stick him in my lineup at the advice of a buddy from back home from Boston in my live final lineup. And Willie had him too, and we were the only two. And I suddenly hear this guy yelling every time he made a big play, because this guy is going off. He's the single-handedly bringing me from, you know, whatever I was to 30th. And it's Willie and I became fast friends, and we've done a bunch of NFL daily fantasy stuff together. So, Willie, great to have you.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Can y'all hear me? Am I okay now?
Oh, yeah, you're good.
Perfect.
Okay. Well, listen, so during that time, now you got to remember, I just started DFS. You know, I won a couple of 20 grand tournaments in FanDuel. I never played DraftKings. So I started playing DraftKings, and I won a qualifier I was 3, and it was like a, I don't know, maybe 34,000 people. I was number 1. I had a $3 entry, put it in, and and I won it. So, then I said, I never played DraftKings. I said, look, we got to learn how to play DraftKings. We didn't understand the scoring system. We didn't know 3-pointers. I'm just used to FanDuel. So I said, man, so the last week we started playing DraftKings. And then I was like, and I don't know if you remember, Drew, I told everybody who I was going to play. I said, I'm going to play this guy. This is who I'm going to play. They said, no, I said, I'm telling you. And I didn't realize there was so much pressure on people because there were people that were sponsored, and so they had a lot to lose. We didn't have nothing to lose. I was just there. I had 1 entry. I said, look, I'm going to go with this guy. Yeah, we're going to go with it. And we're just going to we didn't start off well, Drew. You remember that, we were both way back. I said, damn, this sucks. Then all of a sudden our guys starting to come on. And I said, oh, hold up. And I had Dirk Nowitzki, and he started playing. So I went from like 10th, I went from like 20th place to 10th place. Then I was in 3rd or 4th place. I was in 3rd place. I said, ooh, we have 400,000, So then they took my guy out, on a blowout. And then, so I dropped from 400,000 in 1 minute to $50,000, So that was the most disappointing $50,000 I ever won in my damn life. I was so, the thing that made it worse is we didn't know how you could move people up on DraftKings, how you could move them up. We didn't understand the philosophy. The other guy we wanted to get there was McCullum. And McCullum went off. If we had moved that lineup up, we would have took the whole thing down, and I wouldn't have played Ricky Rubio. But I didn't know how to move it up because I didn't understand the scoring system. So, all in all, though, you go there, you win $50,000 and not knowing anything, and then that rent, from there I won $150,000 on that Monday night thing, like you said. I saw people kept coming up on me. I said, oh, Lord. Everybody coming to me. Cam Newton was playing that Monday night. I ain't going to never forget it. And they kept kicking field goals. But finally, the game ended. And then I took down one of my great tournaments when I won $150K on a 5K. I was number 1 out of 494,000 people, that was in the tournament. So I was in first place. So I don't really play the big lineups. I play the wish and hope stuff. But for some reason, I've been really successful in it. I've won probably over $900,000, in like 5 or 6 years. So I ain't doing too bad, But I don't play a lot of money. I wish I could get the big money, but my behind gets tight. If I get in the big tournaments, I get tight. So I just keep it to the $4 or something like that, and just keep playing like that. So,
and just to finish up, and then we'll move on. Great, sir. Willie's also hosts a weekly show for NFL DFS with who's it with? Dr. Roto? No.
Dr. Roto. Yeah.
Dr. Roto, and so we're doing NFL today, obviously, because that's just the season. But in general, Willie's a great story of someone who can enter those kind of tournaments and do well. And by the way, I ended up finishing 24th in that live final because I had I'm blanking on the guy's name right now from Indiana. He was playing Doug. Oh God, begins with an M. I'm blanking, but McDermott. Yeah. So, and he was crushing it for Dallas, I think, at the time. And then he hurt his knee in the 3rd quarter, and they took him out for the rest of the game. Because I was looking at a top 5 finish at that thing if he had finished off the game the way things were going. So what it is.
Well, Willie, man, where do you? So how do we hear your? Where's your podcast live? Like, where can people find that?
Yeah, unfortunately, Dr. Roto, he just launched the site and stuff, and he's very protective of it, So, unless you're a subscriber, you won't even hear the podcast. But we're on Sirius XM Radio from 7:30 to 9 o'clock in the morning.
All right, I love it. But hey, look, let people subscribe. I mean, if that's I think at the end of the day, if they want the good content, sometimes that's what you got to do, So I like it though, and it sounds like you got that charmed type of approach, man. Like low money entry, big money winnings, man. I think that's the way I'd like to roll. So
Willie's just good people too, man. Well, I met Willie. Willie was my son and I. Like we won. We did it as well as we did at that because we met Willie. That's our viewpoint on it. So Willie, great to have you. Jumping over to not last, but certainly not least, our domainer friend here, and Roman, who of all of us certainly had the biggest payday. Also the same year as last, 2015, Roman won the FanDuel $3 million NFL Live Final World Championship. So he was here for us with NamesCon, and welcome back, man.
Thank you, Drew. I appreciate it. I love hearing these stories because sometimes they have like a general theme. And I know that $3 million payout championship that I won, it kind of started off similar. Halftime, I was, out of I think 102 people, I was in 95th place.
Wow.
And I had to go upstairs to take a breather to say, okay, how is this gonna work, right? And so I came back down after halftime, and I rostered Blake Bortles and Alan Hearns, and immediately Blake Bortles threw an 85-yard touchdown to Alan Hearns, and I went from 90th to like 40th.
Yeah.
And then it was on, and all my players started playing. So that up and down with DFS, that's a true thing for sure, and we've had bad beats as well, and I think we might talk about that later on, but that day was very special. It was a day where, everything aligned. I think during that time frame, I kind of groomed myself to being at like the ultimate DFS shape, where I actually had 3 lineups that I was thinking about. And if I would have chose any of those 3s, I still would have won. But the one that I chose gave me the optimal amount out of those 3. So I was really focused and on point. And that's something that I think people have to realize, is that you really have to do that due diligence. You have to bring everything together. And I mean, each particular position on that roster that you construct is very important, and it has to tell a story. And, if I can go through my roster and I actually provide insight, and actually I did write a book, because after I won, everyone was asking me, how did you do it, and things of that nature. And so after telling like 50 people the same story, I decided to kind of encapsulate it in one source. Yeah. And so I'm very, thankful, gratitude for sure. That was obviously my biggest win. I've been doing that since 2012, and I've been mildly successful. I won, let's say, a couple of tournaments, smaller tournaments for 100K, prior to that. And subsequently after that, I think 3 or 4 for like 150 and 75. So once you understand the dynamics in the system, it makes it a little easier. And then you just have to cross your fingers that there's no injuries, or, the game flow doesn't change too drastically where they pull out your players and things of that nature. So yeah. I'm very thankful to being on this bridge so we can talk shop.
Yeah, man.
Well, just tell everyone the name of your book, man. So make sure you get the name of your book out there.
Yeah. So I think I created the book in 2016. So it's Winning in Fantasy Sports, Tips from a World Champion. And cool. It's all through Amazon and that whole sort of thing. So a good read, pretty quick. People said it's pretty cool. So
I thought it was a great read, honestly. Even though I know what I'm doing, I thought it was a good read.
Thank you, Drew.
And that's such an interesting part for me. I mean, so I play a lot of weekly fantasy. I'm on like 6 leagues, now that my kids are into it, we've got leagues where we've got teams together and teams against each other, and family leagues and friends leagues and all that stuff. But yeah, the biggest struggle, man, it's like really trying to find, I think, good sources of information to get that sort of leg up. I know when we talked about the daily fantasy stuff at the NamesCon session, it was interesting because you talked about how you want to play players from the same team or in the same game, and and how that is like a common sort of thread through a lot of the more successful folks. Like, Miller, you were saying, 8 of the 10 winners this season or whatever it was all had, what do you guys call that when you have 2 people from the same?
Well, I can tell you, so this is current statistics. So it made, interestingly, and I don't know even if you guys all know this exactly, but so far this year, there's been 99 millionaire maker lineups on contests on DraftKings. 9 is more because there's different price points, but 9 of the $20 millionaire maker. So of the 90 top 10 finishing winners so far this season. So remember, top 10 for 9 weeks, 90 top 10 winners. 42 of those 90 have either been a two-person team stack. So a quarterback and a receiver. That's it. Way up from last year, even number one over game stacks. And number two would be a three-person game stack. So you would have Brady, Evans, and if they're playing, let's say, the Browns, Chubb or something like that on the other side, or a receiver from the Browns. So, but this year, 42 of the 90, which is over 50%, I believe, are a two-person team stack or a three-person game stack. Almost, I think 86 of the 90 are actually some form of stack, team or game stack. So if you're not doing some form of team or game stack, which we're going to get into that, I don't want to get into that quite yet, but if you're not doing it, then you're mathematically putting yourself at almost no chance of success in big field, big money contests.
Media Options is the industry's leading domain broker specializing in domain acquisitions, high-value domain sales, and domain name consultation. As pioneers and thought leaders on the subject of the domain aftermarket and domain name value, plus through their clear domain acquisition service, Media Options offers startups and established corporations an unparalleled scope of high-value domain options, providing access to domain names and curation technologies not available elsewhere. Media Options believes in the power of a great domain name and is dedicated to helping you obtain yours. Call or email today to put a domain to work for you.
I think it's interesting, you mentioned the Millie Makers, you're mentioning, DraftKings, FanDuel. So what does everybody, we're in the middle of football season now. So what does everybody play? Why don't we do that? Let's kind of go around the room and talk about what everybody's sort of game of choice, platform of choice, and, and then just to kind of level set around that stuff, both like during this season in football, but also like, but what's your like main, is basketball is Willie's thing. Is it, but he plays football. So let's go in that order. Start with you, Miller. What is your,
okay.
So what's pick your poison, I guess. What's your game of choice? And
so I think we probably should just, I could talk PGA golf all day. And I'm sure Willie could talk basketball. I think I'm going to stick to football just because we got a time frame and we're in the football season, core of the football season here compared to the other sports. So look, I think I play what are called GPPs only. I play large. I play GPPs, which are guaranteed prize pools. Those are the ones where you can win 50, 100, 25K, $1 million, or everything in between. Very different than what are called cash games, where you might be playing $500 to win $500 or $100 to win $100. Most of the professionals play a lot of cash games, but I think this whole crew here, none of us are professionals. I want to make that point. No one in this podcast today are professionals. When I say professionals, none of us play this for a living every day. Laz is runs a massive mortgage brokerage operation. Willie's in, IT and security. Roman does domains and domain investing like me, and we're all doing other things. So we fit. What I put us is kind of that one level below the professionals, but well above the field or the general player. We're kind of experts who aren't
pros. I'm like, damn, how badass are pros? How much of that, because obviously all the success of everybody in this room is pretty crazy. So
yeah. So one of the things I look at is, all right, where can I play where I don't lose where I have an advantage over 95% of the players in the field because I know what I'm doing more. I'm an expert. But I'm also staying away from the pros who are the sharks who will even eat me, okay, most of the time. So that's why I stick to large field GPPs. And in my case, I'm a little bit all over. But in football, I play some very specific things every week. So I play what's called the 3-entry max. That means the most you can have is 3 entries, and I do all 3, okay? That means I'm on a level playing field with everybody else. Or actually, I'm on the highest end of the playing field because a lot of people might only do 1. Or 2. I'm doing 3. I do a 20 entry max where I have 20 entries and I'm ahead. And then I do 100. And most of the big, like the millionaire makers, are 150 entry max. And the professionals, like I think Laz, I believe, enters 150 max in every million maker. You can come back to that when you speak. But that's hard if you're only doing 10 Doesn't mean you can't win. People 2 weeks ago, a guy won with one lineup. So it can happen, but you have to kind of hit it perfectly when you're playing against 211,000 people for $1 million and you only have one. You know, the odds are a lot better if you have 150, right? So I try to pick my battles.
Yep, real quick about that. Just so how much do they cost for each entry for those types of games?
Depends. I mean, contest range. This last week there was a $20 millionaire maker, a $4,444 millionaire maker with only, I think, 300 or something people in it. So I don't know what the max enter was. Laz, what was the max on that? Do you know the 4440?
18, I know because I played and did not win. 18 was the max entry.
Okay.
Right. So you, in theory, could enter 18 times 4,444. You know, like whatever, $80,000 to win that million or whatever it is.
Got it. Okay.
And then, you know, the $20 is the lowest millionaire maker. Some weeks they'll do a $5, which has hundreds of thousands, 600,000 entrants. Some weeks they'll do $100. It just depends on the week. But I try to focus on where I think 3 entry max, 5 entry max. Then I'll take my 3 entry max for 100. So I play a 3 entry max, $150 each, $450 total to win 100K with about 1,100 other people. That's it. Okay. I play a 5 entry max, and then I'll take all those and put them in the millionaire maker for the hell of it. Right. Just by some chance, I happen to hit it out of the park, even though my lineup construction is a little bit different for a 3 entry 1,000-person pool. If I happen to nail it and hit it out of the park, I'm going to make sure I have it in the Millie Maker. Right?
Sure.
So I'll spend the extra couple $100 to put it in the Millie Maker.
And then
so that's it for me.
Well, hold on. When you guys are managing, you know, big, you know, entries, right, where you've got potentially 100 entries. So there's software that you use for this. We talked a little bit about this in the names con session, but how do you manage that many entries?
I'm gonna bump out the Laz and these guys, but when I play 150 max only for golf, and I do use an optimizer to make my lineups initially, and then I go through them by hand and curate them and fix them and clean them up. To use an optimizer in PGA golf daily fantasy, I'm an expert at it, and it's not that hard. 6 golfers, no late swaps, no injuries. I mean, if they're injured, they're injured. Once they're in, they're in. Football, I will say this, and I heard somebody say this weekend who's a very strong professional player. If you are not professional using the optimizer for football, because there are so many parameters, if you're trying to use an optimizer to enter your 150 lineups and you're not a professional at using the optimizer, you're going to get hosed and fucked. Excuse me. And completely screwed. So Laz is this like phenom who happens to do like, I believe, 150 by hand. So we can defer. I'm good, man. I think we can move on to the next person, JT, and we can pick it up from there.
Yeah. So Laz, let's talk. So since we'll just keep going in the same sort of round the horn. So so first of all, are you playing the same games? I know the Millie Maker sounds like that's your thing. So let's talk to both of those things. Which games are your choice? And then also talk a little bit about using the optimizer and or the not using it, and how you manage 150 different entries. You spreadsheets? What do you got, an old school notebook? What's going on?
Yeah, no, I'm more of the old school notebook type of guy.
I love it.
I'm not a professional. I just love it. And I will say, I only play football. I don't do golf. I don't do basketball.
Okay.
I'm one sport during the year, 18 weeks is enough. My one thing is football. So that's all that I focus on, all I really have time for. I think Willie Roman said it earlier, you got to really be in it to win it if you're going to try and do this. So my focus is just around football. And I play primarily large field and small field GPPs. With that being said, playing in a Millie Maker is a lottery ticket, just to be clear to you and everyone that's involved. You really, if you win that, it is largely luck. I mean, there are things that you do, the stacking that Andy mentioned. Yeah, that's a strategy, late swap strategies, looking for leverage plays, people that are under-owned. That's all part of it, but you got to be super lucky. You really, really do. So yeah. Those things are not typically, you should not be expecting to win those. Those are fun, like he said. The smaller field GPPs are where it gets interesting. So the 3-entry max, anything with 300 players or less is where I like to focus. That's where your odds are the best.
Okay.
I do not use an optimizer, and any professional will think I am absolutely crazy for saying that. But I just like to build my own lineups. I like to think through my lineups, and I don't want to rely, because when I think about game theory and I think about things that are happening and I think about the research I do during the week, you can really get way over the moonshot and you can come up with some crazy stuff. So I like to do it by hand, which is definitely different than probably 99% of all professionals that are out there. I build it by hand, and to me, that just gives me a better feel for what I'm doing, and it has to make sense for me to put that lineup in.
Yeah. Okay.
I do also, as a side, I do play some cash games, and I typically will play those against the professionals. So Adam Levitan and I play every week head to head. He's a professional in this sport. That's how he makes his living. I just enjoy playing against him, and I think my record is pretty interesting against a pro. So that's part of the fun.
So yeah, what's your record? How do you do against them?
It is this season, he's up 1 game on me so far.
All right, so you're hanging. You're in.
And it's just fun to see what they're doing and how they're thinking. Tons of respect for those guys and what they do. If that living, good for you. But this is just part of the fun for me. I think you do have to have a strategy. You do need to be focused on it. But it's not as I'm not using the software that a lot of the pros are doing to get it done.
Sure. Okay, cool. No, I love it, man. And I love the contrarian old school approach. That's,
Well, they make fun of me. Basically, one of the things I do is I'll play a defense against an offense, which is totally uncorrelated, makes no sense. No one will tell you that's a good thing to do.
Sure.
But the way I think about it is, if you're playing a defense and your offense scores, you're going to defense. You don't win defenses because of touchdowns that aren't scored against you. The way defenses win are with sacks and pick sixes.
Okay.
So think about it. You're getting the ball back to the offense is not a bad thing.
Sure.
So I have a contrarian approach to that, where most professionals will tell you, do not play a defense against an offense.
Okay. But I mean,
and by the way, I just got to tell you, since you shared that with me, I've talked to some people about that, and it really does, when you really step back. I mean, it does have a line of pretty interesting logic to it. I believe that.
Well, yeah, because you're saying, like, look, it's not about points against, and so it's more about, you almost want a shootout where the defense is going to have opportunities to make plays, and that's only going to happen if you've got an offense that's racking up yards. You mentioned Roman mentioned the Blake Bortles to Allen Hurns. Now I live in Jacksonville. Jags are kind of an adopted team for me to some degree, but and somewhat with Jalen Hurts this year, it's like there's a lot of garbage time points for these guys, and Bortles was sort of classic with that. Like he would rack up points in the fourth quarter when games were already out of hand, but he would throw his pick sixes and all these kinds of things. So you'd have a quarterback like him who would, he was never like a top 10 necessarily, but he would get you on certain weeks, would get you your points, but he would also let the defense get plenty of points, with because they were on the field so much, and you had such a back and forth thing kind of happening.
Got it. That's exactly right, JT. That's the thought process, and you just can't be afraid to be a little bit different.
Sure.
Especially if you're doing research and you're listening to some of the pros. I like to listen to the pros and then kind of try and not do with the pros, because a lot of the field follow that, and that's how you get higher ownership over time. So if you can listen to that and then go somewhere where it's not being talked about, that's leverage. That's how you find yourself in a GPP. I think even Andy, where they were talking about, they played an NBA player that no one's ever heard of. If you can do that and have them succeed, that's how you gain leverage over the field, and that's how you can win these larger field events.
Yep, love that. And then
you got to be able to lose badly to win big.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
But you got to be able to burn your lineup and be last to be first, if that makes sense.
I like it. Yeah. It's sort of like Ricky Bobby, man. If you're not first, you're last, but it's almost like the other way around too. And so there are ways then to be able to tell as the week progresses, like where people, like the ownership numbers and percentages for certain players, so that you kind of know who people are riding with. Or you know that specifically based on verifiable stats as opposed to just general sort of consensus.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
different people will put out their research. A lot of it's really pretty good and pretty on, and it shifts during the week. So someone that you think might be 4 or 5% owned during the week ends up being 15% owned towards the end of the week. So you might want to fade that person and look for a better leverage.
Especially in NFL with injuries, right? So something crazy happens, like Calvin Ridley says, I'm done with football on a Sunday at 11 a.m. Think about that. Your whole week's been planned, and now a major marquee player says, I'm out today. I'm not playing, not in the injury report, and, throws everybody in the tizzy, right? So
even harder for Laz, who's not using the optimizer. So then he's got to go in and update it and fix all those lineups individually.
That's a place where it hurts for sure.
There's
advantage for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, well, cool, man. I love all. I mean, it's such great insight. All right, cool, Willie, man. So what about you, dude? What's your so I mean, you're a basketball guy, it sounds like, but NFL, you heavy in the NFL. What's your game and how do you do it?
I think I'm good at both, so I'm a dual guy. But especially like for example, tonight, I got to see my girl tonight. I only get to see her once a week. So I'm only playing. I play like between 5 or 10 lineups and like 5 or 7 lineups anyway for basketball, so I can manage it. But see, what was successful for me last night, I did well last night, was you look at it where you got to also watch the games. So I'm not taking everybody's advice, for what they say, because my eyes, I used to play basketball as well as, college football. So I watch the games. I look at film so I can, try to pick up little tendencies. And I know when you play the Lakers, man, they are a sieve for points. Those games are going to be high scoring. So, I look at things and I will listen to what Roto-Grinders got to say. I'll listen to Fantasy Labs. And the reason I do that is because I want to know where everybody's thinking. And Osimo, I want to know what they're thinking. Because a lot of times I take the approach that I see what they're thinking and let me go elsewhere, to find my players. I do use the optimizer, but I hand build my lineups. I just use the optimizer to see what it's spitting out, to see what's the chalk, to see what the ownership percentages are. So, that's what I do. Just like for the night, for example, we got a 3-game slate. You got the team that I'm focused on. See, I know, and I play tiers, which I do well. I've taken down a couple of tiers tournaments. A lot of people, like last night, my leverage was, like Steph Curry has been terrible. He has been doo. So, you say, you know what? This is the night where I'm going to go with Curry. Because he's been garbage. He's been awful. So then when he rewards you with 78 points or 83 points, what he did, you feel good about your process. I also listened to
he dropped 50 right last night, right? Or
yeah. But I'm talking 83 like total fantasy points.
Sure.
Yeah. He dropped 50 real. So when you drop 50 real points, oh yeah, you're gonna have a good night. And then I listened to an interview that Alonzo Ball talked about. He complained about not being in the lineup in the fourth quarter, that they would go to him too late, So I'm like, this is a squeaky wheel. So, when somebody has a squeaky wheel, you can use that. So let me lock him in. Let me lock Mr. Alonzo Ball in there. Plus, they're going against the Lakers. So I had a lot of people from that game. So that brought me up. So that's what you look like for tonight. I noticed with the Clippers in Portland, they had 2 blowouts. So I figured nobody's going to be on that game. They won't be on the game because Lillard has been terrible. McCollum has been terrible. And then I know everybody's going to be on Giannis tonight. So my leverage player is going to be George. And I'm going to stack that game because I like the way that game looks and take a couple of people from the other games. And, if Giannis has a 55 or 60 point game and George could get 55 or 60 and I stack that game and people not going to want to go to that game, then I will have a successful night. But if I'm ass early, I know I'm ass. I said, okay, I took a shot. But most people are going to be putting in Giannis, putting in those other games while I'm going to focus on this game. So I'm kind of what you like a contrarian player, So if people go in one way, I want to go the other way, So that's why I listen to it. And I'm like Laz, I build it by hand too. I listen to the optimizer, but I look at it because sometimes it will bring a player that you're not even thinking about. I said, why is this player showing up like this? you know, and then you go do a research and you watch a little film on this guy. You said, this guy got a little pop here. Okay.
All right.
I'll put this guy in. So, you know, I'm like a, you know, contrarian player. Now I play in the 20 entry max like he does. I would do single entries, you know, and then I might take one shot in the big tournament every once in a while. But like I said, I like my money. And you know, people say, hey, you need to get in the $100 contest. If I play that, man, my cheeks get tight, my behind get real tight. You know, I'm like, I just don't, you know, even though I can afford it, but I don't want to, you know, I'm just like the, you know, how would you say? I like to, you know, the bankroll my money. You know, I like that.
I think that's a fair point. And I think, you know, so, you know, hearing what you're saying, you know, there's a little bit of the eye test, right? And then a little bit of that, you know, you got to lose big to win big, kind of same kind of thing like Laz was talking about as far as taking a bit of a contrarian approach. And, you know, but I think it's an interesting point too, when you talk about, it's like, you know, the actual enjoyment of the experience, right? Like basically what I'm hearing you say is, you know, certain things you're not doing because at the end of the day, you don't want to be all extra stressed out. And if you're not a pro and this isn't what you're doing to try to make your money, it's like, you want to enjoy that. I mean, the story I love about what Laz was saying, the one where he finished second, like, you know, he spent that night with his buddies at the bar, like wilding out, having that, and then the whole experience of them running up to the car. It's like, you know, you're doing this because you enjoy it, right? You're driven to do it because you're passionate about it, because you love the experience and, you know, the adrenaline and the dopamine, but it's also like, you know, you don't want to be miserable in the process. You know what I mean? So I think that's, you know, I think that's all good, man. And so, yeah.
I think the guys out here, you know, that's their livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
So as much as, you know, we might enjoy it as a fan or a casual player, which is most of the world that's out there, I'm not so sure they all do. To them, that's their grind. That's their jam to make a living. So a lot of that I wonder about, and especially in some of those conversations. Do they really get to enjoy it, or is it business?
Well, and that's the thing, right? I mean, look, we talk about, you know, you don't necessarily have to enjoy your job, but you don't want to hate it. And if it becomes your job, then it's like, you know, you're like a grinder, like Knish and Rounders, where, you know, you're just trying to eke out that profit and at some point, you know, you're not having fun anymore. So I think that's where it's great and this is why I think this is a great group talking about this kind of stuff, because you guys do it because you love it, right? You're not doing it because you have to do it, or this is like, you're now in that, you know?
Not fun, I'm not interested, man. This is just meant to be fun.
And just adding to that, because then we should get the Roman, but, you know, I do it because I love it. I do it because I want to win, right? And prove I know how to do it and use game theory and use correlation. And, you know, as I said to Laz, like I have to, in either one of the sports, I have to take down a Millie Maker before I'm all done.
No, it's good to have
I mean,
those
somehow, some way, I've been top 10 3 or 4 times. I've been there. And it's like Laz said, it takes a lot of luck to, you know, I'll tell you, man, at the end, I'll tell you a story about a bad beat, because I know we have that to talk about a very close friend of mine 2 weeks ago in the Millie Maker that was just crushing and heartbreaking. But, you know, I think that Laz is right. I think that it's, you know, it's still a grind. I spend hours upon hours doing my homework, right? And that's why I gave up NBA for the most part. I play some showdowns, one game, you know, but because it's like, you know, NBA, if you're not on your phone paying attention from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. every night, right? Because NBA lineups change like, you know, the wind, okay? In this day and age, guys are rested and they're sitting and they sit out. And if you're not on your phone getting alerts, making changes at 6:30, 6:40, 6:50, up until that first round of the games at 7, and then again at 7:30, and again at 8, you can taste your money and throw it down the drain. Yeah. And that's like dinner time. That's time with my kids. That's like, you know, and I decided it was too much. And that's why I love golf and football, because it's, you know, kind of limited to a weekend on the football. And I do most of my homework on Saturday and Sunday, although certainly do some during the week, you know, and golf, similar stuff. Anyway,
yeah,
Roman,
we'll get to Roman in 1 second, but I think just to your point, and and you talk about enjoying it, right? Well, you know, winning is enjoying it, right? If you're not ever winning, you're not going to, you know, you're going to stop doing it. And basketball for me, I mean, we used to do the weekly basketball stuff, but it still involved changing your lineup every day. And that was pretty frustrating. And then also, as my law school buddies, we had a basketball fantasy league that I won twice in a row. And then after that, everybody seemed to kind of peter out. I think they got sick of me beating them. But, you know, it's still all good. You know, we had, we've had some leagues that we've had for, over a decade now, which is just pretty awesome. So, all right. So, Roman, talk to us about your, so what's your deal as far as like what's your daily, not daily, like, but what's your choice of games and approach there?
Yeah, sure. For me, baseball, MLB is my game of choice. I'm really good. I'm okay in football, but I'm really good in MLB. Even though there's a lot more action, right, in NFL. So that's kind of why I kind of gravitated there and that sort of thing.
Real quick, so tell me this. So were you an MLB guy back when you won the big pot that you won? Was that, did you start your daily fantasy journey doing baseball and then segued into football, or did?
Yes, that would be correct. And even the qualifier that I had, it started off, I had started off on the qualifier that was MLB, and I won that qualifier, and then that qualifier changed to like a major NFL type of qualifier to get there. So I had to win like 3 qualifiers to get to the championship, but the first one started with the MLB.
Oh, that's really cool, man. Okay.
Yeah, so. Yeah. In the beginning, I was really big on GPP, try to put in money, crack heads, big rewards, that type of deal. Ever since I've won the bigger tournaments, I kind of transitioned to the idea of, I guess I'm better than most players. So if I do a 50-50, I should be able to cash in. Plus the amount of my bankroll will be a little bit more. And so, 3 years after I won, like 2016, 17, 18, I actually went the pro route, right? So, it's not fun. I got a rude awakening the first couple of years. And then I finally understood, bankroll management, when to kind of push on different opportunities and when to not pull, in other opportunities. And so I did that for about 4 years, where I would say the majority of money that came in, the inflows for the family was that, and I would try to augment that with consulting gigs and things of that nature. So I do understand that life, and it is different. For me, I finally had to realize you need to find an amount that makes you comfortable, that you can kind of go to the clubs or go to a soccer game and not be pressed, right? And I finally got that avenue where now when I do play, I don't even watch, I typically do not even watch NFL games right now anymore, right? I make my plays and then I go about my everyday business. And if I have an opportunity, I'll try to see it. If not, so well. Oh, well, it wasn't like that before, right? Every single play mattered. And I think there's a balance that you need to figure out. And for me, 50-50 is a great thing. What I try to attempt to do is, like I said, I think I'm probably better than a majority of folks. And so I try to dwindle down the deviations as best as possible. So I identify what are going to be the chalk plays for each position. And chalk means the ones that most people are going to generally roster. And then if they're like really default plays, and even though I know there's better players, I may just roster that quarterback and then roster that running back. And then what I do is, now I only have 2 positions, let's say 2 wide receivers versus 2 other, and everybody else has 2 wide receivers. And then that's where I deviate. And I think that I have a big advantage of selecting just 2 wide receivers versus the other folks that have 2 wide receivers. So for example, even though I might think a particular quarterback is going to do better than Lamar Jackson, God forbid if Lamar Jackson goes off, I may lose. But at the same time, if I roster Lamar Jackson as well, and Lamar Jackson gets hurt, we all lose, or we all, get that downgrade. And I just still, again, have to focus on those 2 players. And I think that's been helpful for me when I try to go 50-50 or heads up. I just try to do, okay, it's only 2 people or 1 person that I think I have an advantage based on all my research over you. And I'll say what Andrew and Willie and Laz has been saying, I'll take a mixture of all of them. Like, I think we're kind of in a similar age group. So I'm old school. Everything I do is by pen and paper. I love writing things down. I'm not really an analytics guy. I like to see the eye test. I'll leverage the new technology to some degree, but I don't do that at all. I mean, similar things when I do with domain names. I'm kind of like the eye test. I like doing manual efforts. I think there's something to it. You actually can see how things work when you do that. You know, one of my strategies, just to jump out there, is I actually, before, I think over and under is a big deal. The higher scoring games, the better fantasy outlook. So prior to looking at the Vegas lines, I create my own Vegas lines, right? I anticipate what the lines are. And I've been doing this for several years, even before fantasy. So when I do see a deviation between what I think the line should be and what the line is, then I can dig deeper and see, am I the one that's off or are they? And that's helped me out a lot.
I think, well, because, Bill Simmons and that, I mean, I remember a lot of, they would have guessing the lines, Cousin Sal and all that to try to identify where they thought there was a gap between, the what the public is, not public, but, what Vegas is saying and what their thinking is. And, it's like, okay, why is that? But I think that's a really interesting point. And that's a really cool sort of strategy kind of tip. And I think we can go around the horn on some strategy stuff. And then if we have time to do the bad beats, I know we've got about 15.
Yeah, why don't JT, actually, I think we've done a lot of strategy mixed in. Maybe we should just, because I think it's fun for people watching this Thursday I mean, it's very early, but maybe we go around and do a week 10 kind of early thoughts for this coming week. Yeah, because, it's early, but, and by the way, just to echo what Rome was saying, this is a sheet of paper. You probably can't see it, but my horrible hieroglyphic handwriting, I don't know, I literally start the week the same way every week. I write down, I use RotoGrinders, so I write down what they're called their first look. I write down the DVOA and DVP, which is rankings for each offense and each quarterback in order. And then I go to NFL team stats and I write down in order the defenses, and then reverse order. The offense is top passing offense is 1 to 32. And then in a column next to it, the defense is 32 to 1. So you can kind of see who plays who and where that correlates. And I start off with, pages of handwritten notes as well. So, but I do think it's worth, by the way, it was nice of Roman, we've been using some terms that people may or may not know, like chalk. Chalk means a player who's chalky is highly owned by the field.
Sure.
By the largest owned. And if anyone's watching their phones, this is going to be Dearness Johnson chalk week, because the entire Browns backfield, other than him, has COVID.
So, really?
Nick Chubb, John Kelly, and Belton.
Oh man, I dropped Johnson in my weekly stuff about a week ago because Chubb just came back. So it was like,
yep, this is going to be Dearness Johnson 90% ownership. So be an interesting decision point. But they score a lot on the ground and get a lot of rushing yards for sure. In the essence of time, it might make sense. I think it'd be fun for people to hear kind of everyone's quick thoughts. And again, under the caveat that it's very early in the week for this on a Tuesday morning, very early.
Recording Tuesday morning, we'll drop this on Thursday. So there's obviously a gap. This is, so yeah, no, absolutely. And, but yeah, I mean, this is it. This is where the magic happens, man. This is going to help drive my first big week of DFS. So right now, how am I making my money, Miller? What's up?
So I'll start. I mean, again, I want to emphasize, most of my work gets done. I start the hand stuff on Wednesday, and really Saturday, Sunday, with injuries, with COVID thrown in. There's just so much that will change and so many things will happen. And, one of the I'm flying home from New Orleans this Sunday because it's parents' weekend for my kid in college. And, I'm on a flight during 11:30 a.m., which is when the inactives get announced. And I'm not 100% convinced that, I'll be over the right state or I'll be able to make lineup changes on DraftKings from the plane. It's 50-50 there. So, 11:30 is such a key moment when the teams announce who's inactive. But I did look at a few things for this week early. I do think, look, Tom Brady's playing at Washington. Washington's the 32nd ranked pass defense. So there's no doubt in my mind Tom Brady will be the most highest owned quarterback this week. And his receivers with Antonio Brown out are narrow. So it's going to be very chalky and a potential place to get away from and be contrarian. I'm intrigued with recency bias, right? Meaning, what happened last week that will change people. So maybe a guy who should be highly owned won't be. So the three that jumped out at me, one was, Dallas just got shut out at home. Okay. 30-0. Okay. They play Atlanta, terrible pass defense coming off a disastrous game. So recency bias will people go back to Dak. Is he hurt? is his receiver search. So I think Dak's in an interesting spot to stack. I think Carson Wentz, Indy plays Jacksonville. Okay. Couple things that work in that game, right? Number one, Jacksonville's coming off their, complete shutdown of the Bills. So there'll be some fake recency bias there because they're really not a good football team. Two, Jonathan Taylor is just absolutely destroying people from the running side for Indianapolis. So he's going to be very highly owned against Jacksonville. So there's an opportunity to, play Wentz there. And I think will be kind of sneaky. Wentz has been really good. Michael Pittman's a stud. And maybe you can even stack him up with Jonathan Taylor, who's catching passes. So I think that's another one. Dak. And I think, I think Russell Wilson coming off an injury might be lower owned at Green Bay. But in that game, I would only do that if Aaron Rodgers is playing. I wouldn't touch that game if it's Jordan Love again, because I just don't think there'll be enough scoring if it's not Rodgers. But if Rodgers is playing, we could get into a shootout. Russ on the road, coming off a 5-week injury with a finger. So I think there's some interesting. And then to me, the other one, and I'll move on, is probably be chalky, but hopefully Dearness Johnson makes it less so. I just think Dalvin Cook will be in a huge, I will be overweight on Dalvin Cook against the Chargers, in Los Angeles this week. The Chargers run defense is an absolute abomination, and this guy is an absolute stud. And I can't imagine any scenario not being on that, even in high ownership.
Okay. All right. I like it, man. Those are a lot of gems. So let's see where Laz is at. Do you concur, or you got a whole different?
You might not have even started.
I started, some of what Andy says makes sense. My approach is a little bit different. I'm going to look at game totals early on, key in on 4 or 5 games. So this week, I'm going to look at the Wentz. I think that's an interesting game with Wentz. I think the Kirk Cousins game is very interesting. Tom Brady and Allen have been the perennial ones to go to. I mean, it's been a pretty simple season up until last week, where you can key on some of the top quarterbacks and those stacks, and that's all you really needed to do. One thing I do want to say about the stacking, and if you can stack, you have to be right a lot less, right? So if the game goes off and you've got the right game stack, that's the reason you do it. To pick individual players that are going to go off and be right on each category, that's a lot harder than being right on a game stack or a game that's high scoring. You have a better chance that way. So that's the reason you want to game stack and not be finding individual wide receivers that might do well. You have to be right a lot more than if you just have the right game stack in place.
Yeah, but that's a great point.
And Roman made that clear, right? I mean, Alan Hearns and Bortles, there you go, right? He went from 90th to 40th with that one pass. So.
That's your leverage. I mean, you're either right or wrong, but when you're right, it really matters. 5 games that I would look at, though, I think Alan, the Bills on a bounce back. I like that. I like Tom Brady. I like Minnesota game. I even like the Patriots game, and I think Jacoby Myers is going to score an actual touchdown this week. Mark that down, and I like Carson Wentz stack. So those are the 5 games that I've circled based on various reasons, either to do with game totals or some of the recency bias and going against the recency bias. I like Andy said, I agree with him. I think Jacksonville's not a good football team. So I would look for a letdown on them, but I'd also look for a bounce back in the Bills. That's my early on kind of impression of things. As the week goes on, I will develop my player pool, try and have a certain amount of QBs, probably not more than 6 or 7 QBs as my main focus. Obviously, you're going to have the most amount of wide receivers in your player pool. Tight ends, I'm going to have 3 or 4 tight ends. I'm going to have probably 5 or 6 running backs. Wide receivers being the most. Defenses, I'm always going to look for a cheap defense that makes sense. Last week, everyone was on Kansas City. That was obvious. They ended up with 11 points for a $2,300 defense on DK. So that made sense. But that's really it. Early on in the week, I'm just keying on the games that I want to focus on, and then developing my player pool. As time goes on, we get into Friday, Saturday. I've listened to a lot of research, read research, and then I'm honing in on some stacks that I feel really good about in developing from there. Obviously injuries, and then leverage comes in. That's when you need to start looking at ownership more seriously.
Got it. Okay.
And be different. This is where we go back to, you either be different and you crash and have a terrible looking lineup at the end of Sunday, or you be different and you really shine.
Yeah.
So my only thought is, JT, never be afraid to be different, and don't just follow the herd. The herd never wins.
Okay.
The herd is always going to be average.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that's it might end up even being the title of this week's show. So, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think about Russell Wilson? I mean, that was Miller thinks Wilson might have a bounce back, and people are forgetting how good he is, and
again, only in an Aaron Rodgers situation, though.
I know, you qualified it a lot. I get it, but I'm just just curious.
I will just say I'd go head to head with Miller this weekend, not taking Russell Wilson.
By the way, and
that's where I would lean too. I almost feel like maybe I'm caught up in the recency bias of, hey, I've forgotten about Russell Wilson because we haven't seen him in a bit. He's coming back on the road, against a pretty decent team. It seems like kind of a reach, but that's just me. And I don't play, you know what I mean? This is going to be my first week, but I'm going to win a Millie Maker this week. So,
Hey, maybe he'll be in the Millie Maker, but I'm not.
As long as you put Jacoby Myers in that head-to-head, I'll consider it.
Hey,
if I hear one more week, Joby, we're on 2.5 years of Jacoby Myers never scoring a touchdown, and every week I listen to Alex Myers. Every week I listen to Alex Baker, Osimo, say this is he likes Jacoby Myers, and eventually he'll score a touchdown, and every week he does. And the guy's a 13-point machine. That's it. No ceiling. So you take Jacoby Myers all day. I'll take Kenny Board.
Hey, let's go. Hey, he's building. He got his first 2-point conversion, so he has scored his first 2 NFL points, which is
see,
build on that, Mills. So let's go. Give me a one-on-one, and this is part of the fun, JT. So this is where your buddy says, "Hey, let's go." He challenges you on DK. You play against him. That's fun, and that's really at the end of the day.
But it won't be Russell Wilson if I did a head-to-head, just so we're clear.
And let's go. That's what you said. Those are spots. Those are 2 spots.
Not a head-to-head for Wilson. No way.
I like it though. We're gonna have to do a follow-up and find out who wins, or at least post something about it. So we're gonna have to put that out there in the universe. So all right, I love it. All right, Willie, what about you, man? So this week, what are you looking at? Where are you at so far? Because I also think you guys talking about your week, the picks for Sunday is also a really good insight into your process, which I think is also really cool. But go ahead, Willie.
Yeah, I mean, things that I'm looking at is I think that Minnesota-San Diego game is really interesting. A lot of people are not going to want to stack that game because you got a lot of high-price players. But I think somebody like Mike Williams, who has been butt cheeks for the last 2 or 3 weeks, that'll be a guy, a man of interest for me. Along with taking the quarterback, doing a double stack. That's when you do a double stack where you'll play. You'll play the 2 receivers for the Chargers. And then what you'll do is you will play the quarterback, and then you could actually come back with Cook, and you could come back with Conklin if you want to do it. Then what you could do is you could look at for low price guys like McKissick going against Tampa Bay, because he would be the perfect guy. They will be behind. You could put him in a lineup. You could also, that's when you could use a Dearness Johnson, because you have contrarian type players in there. Because just like Osmo talks about, it's not that you have a player that's highly owned. It's your total value of your lineup that you have. It's everybody. So it doesn't. So too many people get caught up with ownership. It's not about your ownership, but you just got to be different in other places. Then that will make a lot of sense. Just like a guy like that. Don't be stupid sometimes. A guy like James Conner, he played 75 or 80% of the snaps. When they have that injury, he got a great matchup going with Carolina. He's going to get the rock. He's at a reasonable price. So if you go for hot stack like that, and I think I'm gonna be honest with you, I do like Tampa Bay, and everybody's gonna be on them. But one thing that gives Brady a little trouble is pressure. Okay, and I don't know if you remember last year, The Redskins gave them all they want to handle. Sometimes it's just matchups. There's certain matchups that people do things. So listen, I'm going to have my share of Tom, but I got a cause for pause on Tom Brady this week because I think a lot. Because one thing he don't like.
Pause. I love it. Wait, we got
is he does not like pressure. Case in point, you saw what New Orleans did.
Well, and I'll tell you something. I'm sorry. Well, I don't mean to interrupt you, man, but I would agree. I mean, I think the interesting thing about Brady, you got Chase Young, and this kind of thing with him and Brady. Like, I think Chase Young's playing right right. Is he still on Washington?
Oh yeah, he's still listen. Listen. I'm a weird
kind of game. He seems to be the kind of guy who gets up for particular matchups, and I think that he could give Tom some trouble this week. I don't love the Conklin pick, but again, I'm coming at it from a whole different angle than you guys. I think that's an interesting comment, though, about the stack of that tight end, him and Dalvin Cook. I think Dalvin Cook is going to go off. Interestingly, the Conklin thing, I think would be kind of, out of all the tight ends, you think he's somebody that, is that just because of the stack or because
no, he's not going to be core. It was just, I'm just giving you different scenarios of things that you could look at if you want to stack, because you got to save money.
Okay.
Somewhere. You got to say, you got to have some savers in there, and you can throw on San Diego, using a tight end. So that's why, you have your two guys that see a lot of people are not going to want to be on Mike Williams. He has had tough matchups. I mean, I knew you couldn't play Mike Williams, but this is the week. His prices come down, to a more of a reasonable price, and man, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, with Herbert. You run it back with even Cook, you just do some different things, and you can win some money this week, but that's why you need to find savers, because that's a high price stack.
Yeah, that's
a lot of Herbert's going to be low owned, and Mike Williams is going to be low owned. Herbert's perennially too low owned. I was in the top 10 this weekend, and for the late slate 100K or up until the very end, I finished 80th, and I had Herbert. I had a Herbert, Williams, Allen. Who'd they play? The Chargers?
They play for the
Yeah, I had a Herbert, Williams, Allen stack there, and Herbert was even in the late slate 3-gamer, he was under-owned.
Yeah,
he's just perennially low-owned.
Yeah, and I like Herbert a lot. I mean, I'm an Eagles fan, so that game hurt, but he's very, very good. I think Williams, obviously started the year on fire, kind of came back down to earth a little bit, but I think that it does create these interesting dynamics, whereas you have the flow of the season. And you have a player that then goes from, he kind of explodes, and then he sets sort of a higher price and then comes down a little bit, and then all of a sudden makes it fit in. Because I think there's this idea of balance too in your lineups that is also really important, in this balance of the cost, because each player is a different price versus, guys are going to deliver or think you're really going to deliver. And even if they're chalky, you still want to get them in your lineups, and then you got to find your sleepers. So I think all of that makes a lot of sense, man. And I think that's.
I just want to add one other thing. See, this is the thing, but also recency bias. You got to remember the last game Herbert played, he played against the Ravens. The Ravens roughed him up. Okay, so recency bias is a monster. That's why when Anthony Davis messed my lineups up by going out with a hurt stomach, I say, you know what, he will be locked in the next slate. Because that rascal killed my lineups, and I'm going right back to him because people do not trust that soft rascal, and I say, you know what? I mean, either going to win all the money or I'm going to lose it all. I'll be out early, so
that's the last said, man. That's it. You know what I mean? You got to take those risks, and you either, you're going to crash and burn, or you're actually going to win. But, if you're going to go with the herd, you're going to be average. And,
I know we got time. We got to give Roman a shot.
Yeah, Roman, and then we're going to and then we basically got to.
But just one thing on Dearness Johnson. I just saw he's negative. He's vaccinated and negative. So the Patriots is interesting because I've been playing running backs against the Patriots all season. I'm a Patriots season ticket holder. Laz will be at the game in the DraftKings VIP booth. Dearness Johnson's $4,700 because he was priced assuming Chubb was going to be active. I mean, he is going to be against the Patriots, who have been a run funnel. He is going to be crazy owned. But I will tell you, as Bill Belichick's teams often do, this defense is starting to come together.
Yeah.
And
look, the Patriots are a good football team. Like, they're well coached.
But they were a run funnel for 6-7 weeks here. I mean, they were just they couldn't stop anybody. Okay, anybody. And and they're starting to come together and gel a little bit. So, it's a really, a lot of leverage if you have the balls to fade Dearness Johnson, at 4,700, almost minimum running back salary against a team that's been terrible against the run this weekend against the pass. So just food for thought. But I want to hear what Roman has to say.
Yeah, Roman, talk to us, buddy.
Well, I typically do not do analysis early like this, but based on having this show, I decided to do so. The game of the week for me is the Cowboys game. I do love that game. I think it's gonna be high scoring. I do think the idea of like we mentioned earlier, recency bias. I do like Dak Prescott. I like to couple him with CD Lamb for big plays, and then also on the flip side, I like Cordell Patterson. He seems to be the number one for everything: run, pass, kick.
Well, there were seasons where he was classified as a running back and a receiver in some fantasy.
Right,
so
right. He's a total utility weapon. So, if it is going to be a, high scoring game, he's going to be figured out to, have big opportunities. So does CD Lamb. So I do like that. Looking at the Vikings game, if I would go there, I'd go with Justin Jefferson. I do think that last year, you saw what he was capable about. He's a beast, and I think this year, things are, he's struggling, but I think last week he caught a 50-yard touchdown pass.
Touchdown.
And I think, a pivot from, rostering Dalvin Cook might be to roster one or two of those Minnesota Vikings and say maybe it'll be a shootout that way. So I do.
Sounds like that's where Laz is headed.
Yeah, I do like that. I
will mention Conklin and Cook, and and the Vikings seem to just they play everybody close, but they score a lot of points, right? So it's like those are games where almost ideal for fantasy, right? They go back and forth, and everybody scores a shitload, and with a lot of players getting a lot of stats. So yeah.
Yeah, and finally, I'm looking at the Detroit-Pittsburgh game. Pittsburgh's coming in on a short week. They gave up 20 some odd points to the Bears. I do like DeAndre Swift. I think basically Detroit's like two-dimensional. Either throw it to the tight end or give it to the running back. And the running back catches the ball out of the backfield. So if they could score some points, I think Swift might be part of that. So I do like that as an opportunity. That's it.
All right, cool. Well, that's all good
stuff.
Just
talking, JT, just want to tell you one. I heard the CD Lamb comment from Roman. So just a quick a 30-second bad beat story. So one of my close friends, he's Spag Dog, DAWG on DraftKings, and a very dear friend of mine. Spags called me up. Spags was second in the Millie Maker, back and forth between first and second, very, very late 3 weeks ago. He was up first in a bunch of 3 entries. He was up like 250, 60 grand and the Millie Maker sitting there on the cusp. And I'm like, dude, you're going to win this thing. There's like nothing behind you. Calls me up I forget who the Cowboys were. Cowboys-Patriots game. And he's like, dude, like the only thing that can screw me is like if CD Lamb ever would have like a long touchdown. Okay. And I'm like, dude, the game's over. There's like 40 seconds left. Game go, CD Lamb and catches the freaking 48-yarder in overtime or whatever it was, or to beat the Patriots. He goes, I don't feel too badly for him because he won like $75,000, but he dropped $190,000 on that CD Lamb pass in overtime, last play of the entire day in the slate out of nowhere. The only thing that could have beat him.
That beat sucks, man. Well, and it didn't help that you were sitting in his ear telling him, "You got this. It's a lock. It's a lock. It's stone cold." And then, of course,
you don't usually see 45-yard wide open bombs in overtime.
That was
certainly against Bill. Certainly against Bill.
That's rough. All right. Well, look, this has been fantastic. One last question before we go. So, Laz, do you get the box because of your winnings, or just because you are because you're a G in real life?
I'm a loyal DK guy. I became friends with the guys that started it way back when. So I don't know. It's probably a combination of a lot of things, but I really like doing it because I get to bring my kids to the games and they love it. And That's all part of the fun for me. Again, this is all about the enjoyment and having fun and keeping it real on that level. So as long as people keep that in mind, hey, DFS is where it's at, right?
Yeah.
Don't follow the herd, because you will be very average. That's all he's got.
I love it.
You did it last because you're a good guy.
Domains, that's true in crypto, and that's true in DFS.
It is. If you want to be average, follow the herd. Otherwise, if you're going to stand out, you got to take some risks. 100%. You've got to have some vision, and you got to be willing to take a risk and try to execute on it. So, without a doubt. All right. Well, look, guys, this was a pleasure. All you, Willie, Roman, Laz, Miller, thank you so much for joining. We'll definitely do this again. I'm excited to see how all these predictions play out. The show is going to be airing on, so you guys know the show will air on the Thursday. So for everybody, you'll get to hear some of this stuff before the games go off, and hopefully not a lot has changed between now and then. So in the meantime, I just want to say thanks to the audience. I say it on every show. Without you, there's no us. Thank you all for tuning in, and be sure to check us out next time on Domain Sherpa, where all roads lead to domains, here on Down the Rabbit Hole with our boys, the Rabbit Hole Gang. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
It don't matter what you do, I will.